Taylor, check this out. Oh no! Go. It's massive!
Hello and welcome to 7 Blue Pixels, where we take some of the tools and techniques at some of your favourite online trends. I'm Taylor and today we're looking at how to do the balloon. So the balloon head, the big head, the bobble head, whatever you may recognise it as, has always been incredibly popular in today's culture.
It's massive!
Initially starting from desk-sized bobbleheads to anything in music videos, film and TV, it's always incredibly entertaining and funny to see someone's head twice the size. The first time I recognised the big head being really funny was on the N64 system GoldenEye, where you could make your enemies have massive heads. It was a lot of fun working with Ash from 2B Media on this project.
And then it'll be you. And then whilst it's here, it'll again.
So we're going to start off in After Effects, and from there we're going to get a mask of Ash's head and we're going to scale it bit by bit to help punctuate the joke. From there we're going to go into Cinema 4D and we're going to learn how to do some projection mapping using our 2D texture onto a 3D model. And then from there we're going to go into Blender using Keen Tools FaceBuilder, and we're going to bring that back into Cinema 4D and use a balloon cloth simulation to inflate Ash's head. Once we've done that, we're going to render it out via Redshift and use our Open EXR and Aces color space to composite all together using Supercomp. So without further ado, let's get into it. Okay, so this is the shot from the film, and this is the raw plate filmed on an FX3, and it's Ash blowing up the balloon. He inflates his head, but at the beginning of this shot is the end of the previous shot where his head is already blown up. So we need to work out how we're going to get that. Okay, so we have our next layer on top, and so what we would do is duplicate the layer, and we go into here and we've added a Roto Brush onto it. So if we solo this layer, all we've done is Roto Brush the head, because that's all we want to expand. Once we've Roto Brushed it out, we then add our Bulge effect, and as you can see, that's what we're getting. We've gone nice and high with the effect just to overemphasize the comedy in this. And then as we go into this next layer here, this is much later on. So again, we've got another Roto Brush, and we've got a bulge and a mesh warp. So the point of this is, if I turn off the mesh warp and the bulge for a second, his head is expanded. Okay, so I've added a scale just to help bring this out, because this is the last one before the actual CG balloon goes into place. So we've added a bulge, and that's just really overemphasized that, and we've added a mesh warp. And the mesh warp is to ensure that this stays connected to the neck. If we have that without, and we put our back plate back on, you can see that it's all starting to come apart in the center here. But if we put our mesh warp on, we can blend that all back into the neck. And with it expanding, we don't really tell. And then if we put the last layer on, the last layer is another Roto Brush, just to get the hand and the balloon back over the top. And that is essentially how we build up his face over time. Okay, so here's our footage. I'm just going to increase the resolution just a little bit, create background object. And we go back into our objects here, okay? And we have our sole camera. Brilliant. So what is it that we need to do? So we now need to bring in a head model. So we go up to here, models in the asset browser, head, double click, and we have a head model. Way too close to the camera, so we're just going to bring that back, and then in the camera view here, we're just going to roughly try and place this how it is that we need it. Okay, so look, that's already working well for essentially what it is. We can get a few kind of like an FFD mesh deform or anything. We can start bringing these in, or we can start trying to bring it in and out, whatever. But I think for now, this is working what we want. Maybe even bring it down if we needed to, that kind of thing. You know, rotate it out, however you wanted. But for the purpose of this tutorial, that's working well for us. So how do we project the texture onto this image? So I'm going to hold control and I'm going to drag our solved camera up. I'm going to get rid of the protection node and I'm going to rename this as projection camera. For some reason my caps lock was on. Okay, so I'm going to go into here, create a new material. And in here, I'm going to get the original texture. So this texture is essentially just a still from one of the frames, but it's one where I find it funniest. And we're just going to plug it into the color output for now, okay? And that's our texture. Let's rename this head projection texture, just so that we know what we're looking at, difference from the main one. So I'm going to bring this and place it onto the generic head bust, okay? And then here, delete the old material. I'm going to go to here, change UMapping to camera mapping, and then we're going to bring the new camera into here. And we're going to make sure that this is the right ratio that we need. And I'm going to move the protection tag back onto our projection camera, so we can't move it, okay? But what we can do now is move our head where we want. So I'm just going to make sure that that's projected where we want it. So we're not going to worry about the background for now, because this hasn't quite gone how I want it, but we can make it work for us. So we've got our background kind of where we want it, okay? Then if we go into our solved camera, and we just move, and we create a new camera from here, new camera, and we're going to call this animation camera, okay? We go into this camera, and we can essentially move this camera back to get our head where we need it. And so what's happening here? So we're initially looking through our projection camera for our background. Because his head is slightly different, because it's from a different frame, he's dropped down in frame. That's why it's looking a bit weird. But it's come from the solid camera to a projection camera, and our material here, if we turn off the background, our material is being projected through the solved camera at the correct aspect ratio, to then into the animation camera, to which we put our background back on, and we go back into our redshift view. We're able to see a very shiny currently, because I appear to have left the the reflection on. Let's turn that off. Lovely. So we've now got a great kind of little digi-double version of Ash's head using the projection. And with our animation camera, we can slightly turn this. Now be aware, because the projection gets a bit chaotic at the back, okay? So if we press Control Shift Z, that'll put the camera back to where it was, okay? But what I also like to do is with the animation camera, go into our coordinates, and I'm just going to put a keyframe on frame 0, and so that if we go later on in the timeline and we end up moving our camera quite chaotically, all we got to do is go to the next frame and it will just reset where we need it. When we're dead happy with that, we can now go into simulation, balloon, and we can just run our balloon. Obviously though, however, it's going to drop because it can't do anything. We've got gravity on, there's no kind of restrictions or anything, okay? So what we need to do, we need to make a vertex weight map. So how we're going to do that is we're going to come out of our camera view for a second, and we're going to go to our model, okay? And within our model, we're going to get our faces, and let's just turn visible only off, and let's just grab a bunch of faces here. Yep, that looks good to me. We've got one missing face there, so let's put visible back on so we don't grab too much. And I'm just going to make sure that these shoulders are grabbed. A nice loop. Perfect. I'm going to go to select, store selection, just because it's always good to have the selection there, and then select set vertex weight. Okay, So as you can see, we now got a red and yellow map. So what does this mean? So if we go into our balloon simulation and we go back into our model view here, we go back into our balloon simulation and we go mix animations, and we're just going to add the vertex weight map, which is this one here, into here. And what this will do now is now pin whatever color it deems is the highest influence to the bottom. Okay, so if we just play this through now, we can see that the head has been given the main thing, and we don't want that. Okay, so now we know the red is what's being pinned. So if we just go back to our vertex map and hit invert and press play, perfect. So our cloth simulation or our balloon simulation is now working in the area that we want it to work. So we go back into our balloon and we're just going to put our vertex map in the map here, and let's increase the overpressure to 3. Now if we play this again, our head's expanding, but it's immediately dropping. So to avoid that, we're going to press Ctrl D, go into our simulation, scene, and we're just going to turn gravity off. We can always add a gravity modifier later. So now we've got our head, we're just going to run our simulation. And one thing you'll notice is that as the simulation is running here, we're actually losing our texture. Our texture is not really expanding with the balloon. It's kind of just having everything stretch around it, which is not what we're after. So what we want to do is we want to go back and we want to right click on our material here, generate UVW coordinates. And what this would do is that it would generate a new UV mapping for this head projector. Okay, so if we turn off the background for now, and we go into animation camera, and let's just hit play, everything is now starting to expand appropriately. Now, of course, the issue we have with projection mapping is that it will grab the side of the wall and things that we haven't already got. So we need to make sure that our animation camera is slightly perhaps off to one side. And if this means moving, you know, Ash's head slightly, it means moving it, but it means that we can now get away with a slightly better balloon effect. And with the overpressure set at 3, we can expand it out, and we can even then start playing with all these settings. But that's how we do it with projection mapping. So how did we actually do it for our final piece? So for that, we're going to have to go over to Blender. In Blender, there's a plugin called Keen Tools FaceBuilder. Okay, and this is what we made using the FaceBuilder. So we had some images of Ash, and we built our face with them. So you effectively bring a new head in and you upload the images that you want. So we had these, and you use these pins to just reshape the head. And you do it in multiple passes. The first pass, you will just make sure that you get a generic look of the head. And then you do it again, and you'll start focusing on details from the front, side and back. And then you do it again from the front, side and back to ensure that all the details are somewhat matching. Okay, and then when you get a good enough approach, for us we just needed good enough. Okay, we're going to create texture, and then we're going to export the texture, and then we'll export the head model. So this was super easy to do. This took us what, maybe like 15-20 minutes just to make sure that we had everything that we wanted, and we actually got a decent texture out of it. Now, in hindsight, I would love more images of Ash with his mouth open, etc. But we did come across that problem, and we did fix that problem as we went on. So we're going to come out of Blender. I'm going to go back into Cinema 4D. And in Cinema 4D, we're going to open up our Keen Head tools. So, as you can see, it's a lot less chaotic on the right-hand side of the Objects panel here. If I turn all these off, we have our basically FaceBuilder head that's coming, and we have our texture. If I go into the texture, you can see that we've already got something there. So let's open up our texture. So this is how it came in Photoshop. So as you can see, we've got bits of the ear to fill out. We've got all this round here to fill in. We've got bits of the chin to fill out. We've got holes in the nose that need filling in. We've got this kind of weird dimple here. And we've got a few eye fixes to fix as well. Okay. And not only that, if we don't fill in this gap here, this will all just be blank space and it will make the texture look really strange. So after a bit of playing around, this is the texture we ended up having with. And it still makes me laugh every time I see it. So now we have that texture fix in place. We can go into Cinema 4D and we can load that in. So you can either load it in as a PSD or you can load it in as a PNG. So that's what I've done here. I've flattened the texture and brought it in. Now, I don't necessarily need anything else apart from the reflection being off. But if you wanted to, you could go in and build your own bump maps and everything. But I think this worked for our purposes exactly what we need. So if I go back to frame 1, this is our scary ash head. But in reality, that's kind of all we needed. We didn't need anything fancy. We're not ILM. You know, we don't need anything over the top. We just need something that's going to work. Okay. So because I've pre-cached this, if I jump to about 200 frames in, you can see that already we're getting a much better simulation because we're able to get control of this. And not only that, obviously the head texture at the back isn't great because we didn't quite finish it, but we're never seeing that. But not only that, we get full control over where we want Ash's head to look, how we want it to move. And the beauty of this as well is that the head model comes in with some really nice meshing, really nice, which means that the head is already built for cloth simulations, rigid simulations, whatever it is that you want. The Keen Tools FaceBuilder is already built for something absolutely incredible. So we go back into our solve camera and we put our background back on. You can already start seeing just how much it's blending in. We can start bringing that in. We can make it, if we look at our vertex map, we can make it just pop from the very bottom. And that's working so well for us. We haven't got any balling. You know, everything's working great. And then we could bring in some lights. So we've got an area light, which will affect this side. But before I did that, sorry, we had a dome light. And what I did, I just turned it all the way down. And this just gave me a complete blank space to work with. I then had an area light, which lit up the left side of Ash's face, where the light was coming in from left to right. And we had another one just to kind of reflect the wall back at him, just so that we had a little bit more fill on this side of the face. And that was it. We rendered that out, brought that into After Effects, and let me show you After Effects. And as you can see, that is the quickest and cleanest way of ballooning a head. Okay, so we're here in After Effects and we have our balloon head. So this is kind of what the final render looked like. So I've gone into my project settings and I've gone into color and I've ensured that we are working with ACES, and the color space set to ACES-CG because that's what has come out of the open EXR files from Cinema 4D. I've then gone into my footage and ensured that that was set to RAW so that I get the absolute quality, and I've turned my display off because I'm not looking to necessarily blend anything into any other colors. I just want the head to blend in with the body. So what I've done is in that first layer, I've opened up Mocha. I have Mocha Pro, but you can also use Mocha for AE. And I've just basically just got a really nice track around the very bottom of his neck where it connects with the collar, and then just a basic mask around his head and then some stuff around his shoulders. And I'm using these for different purposes as I go. So let's find out what I used them for. So as you can see here, I've now used it to cut out his head. I then have made a null object to which I have pasted all the tracking data to get a nice secure track of the bottom of his neck so that I can now parent the balloon simulation to this track and have it move with the body appropriately. You can also do a similar thing within Cinema 4D, which I did, so that as his body moves, the balloon simulation moves with it and you can get a better interaction. I then used content aware fill to get a very quick and basic head replacement to the wall. This gave me a very nice clean plate with a little bit of neck left for me to start putting my balloon in. So let's start with my balloon. So I've brought this in as a guide layer. So I know exactly where it's meant to be sitting in a frame. But this will never get rendered out because I've gone right click and made sure that guide layer is selected. So I never have to worry about this if I've accidentally left it on during render or anything. It's more of a reference frame for this composition. I then have brought in my head. And my head is an EXR image. And I've opened the extractor and opened up my beauty pass. That's all I needed for this, was just to get the beauty pass out. I then have my null, which has all my position data on it. So I'm able to parent this to the null to get it moving with the body. And then I'm able to bring a roto of the neck on the shirt back up. And I'm going to make it a guide layer because I don't necessarily want to render it with the head, because I want to color grade the head, or grade the head essentially, and make it flat with the rest of the image. And if I start doing that with the collar texture on, it's just not going to look good. But it gives me a rough idea of where the outline is, so I can shape the head where I need it. So perfect. So what do we do from here? So we're going to go back, and that's our head balloon. Let's put that on as well. So that's looking really good. And what I've done is I brought in a Meshwarp, and that Meshwarp is just keyframed over time, as you can see, just to ensure that it fits with it being in the neck and inside the shirt. Because if we don't have it on, it just starts looking unruly as it goes on immediately. But if we put the Meshwarp on, we can start bringing it back into place and the texture goes back on top. So speaking of the texture, let's put the shirt roto back on. Perfect, that's fitting right in place how we want it. And then what we use is that we used Supercomp. And we use Supercomp quite easily and quite effectively in this one. So if I open up the panel, let's show you the panel here. I've brought in all my layers that I essentially need for this composition. And as you can see, only the head balloon has any kind of effects on it. So you can see up here what's happening in this little window. Let's make that a bit bigger. So with Supercomp, you can get all your light and atmospheric effects to interact with each other far more appropriately than After Effects normally does natively, allowing you to stack them how you want them to. So we brought in our original plate, our cutout on top, and as I click onto each one, you can see it changes. But if I come out of it and I click away, it gets the full comp. I then brought in our head cleanup and our shirt roto, and obviously nothing's really changed. And then I brought in our head balloon, okay? And let's see what I did to each of these effects, just so you can see what I'm doing with it. So with the head balloon, I wanted things to work a little bit better. So I brought in the color correction and I asked it to match the background. And what this does is that it starts finding the black and white points. And so if I click away from this, you can start seeing now that the head is starting to look better. The skin's reacting to the skin and the clothing. It's starting to look slightly more in the shot. I then went into light wrap and I added a very soft light wrap around the edges, just so that it had something, and a little bit of haze, which you can't really see too much, but it does add a little something to it. So when we come out of Supercomp, everything's starting to look a bit better, and then we have a very quick gradient on top, just a very quick one, just so that I could see what I'm doing. And we use Red Giant's Colorista 5 for that one. And that is how I comp together Ash with a big balloon head. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like, subscribe and leave a comment if you have any suggestions or you just want to ask a question. And I think this video here is what YouTube recommends you watch next, and this one is what I recommend you watch next.